of Synthesized Sunsets. Today we are joined by Dylan, recent friend of the pod, as well as Trevor, who is a friend of the pod from all the way back in episode 7. So for these season finale episodes, we like to have them be a little bit more casual rather than having on some special guest. It's usually people that we've already had on before, friends of the pod, and we have our discussion be a little bit more casual. So this time we read 3 stories and 1 novel, and we're going to talk about these with a little bit more of a book club vibe that has a loose Halloween theme. So the stories that we read were Monuna Aware by Ken Liu, Mountain by Cixin Liu, and Cannonball, also by Cixin Liu. And then we also read the Halloween-ish themed novel, Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. So I think that with Ray Bradbury, I think one thing that's interesting about Ray Bradbury to me is that he was sort of canonized as like a children's author before he was canonized as an adult author, I would say. Like, I don't think that this is like uniformly the case, but I think that, at least for me, I definitely see Ray Bradbury as being like even more of a pillar of like the like books you would read in like, you know, late elementary, middle school canon than just like authors more broadly. And I think part of why that is because I think he's really good at writing stories that kids would be interested in and not necessarily in a way that adults would be interested in. And a story that I want to talk about first, which I think is a great example of this, is the story All Summer in a Day. So All Summer in a Day is a story that is very short, and it is basically about an alternate situation or an alternate version of Venus where it rains all the time, except for like one day every 7 years there is sunshine and kids can just have the best recess ever. And then it ends, and then there's no more recess for another 7 years. And there's this kid who is kind of getting bullied in her class because she's from Earth and people are sort of jealous that she's been able to see the sun, and she has all these takes about the sun that she insists on, and people think she's kind of annoying. And so, spoiler, eventually what happens is that she gets like locked in the supply closet. And the kids kind of forgot that they put her there, and they go outside and play, and they come back, and then they realize that she was unable to have this recess, and this was kind of fucked up. And then all the kids are kind of just like, ugh. And then the story ends. So I guess before sharing my take about the story, like, did you guys have any thoughts on it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
felt like this story was kind of just describing Seattle. You can tell me if I'm wrong. No, I thought this story was interesting. Ray Bradbury has been said to do this thing where he tried to write 1 short story a week, 52 weeks a year, which is crazy to me. That he was writing over 50 short stories a year. And this one kind of reflects that. Like, it was a really short, kind of single idea short story. As far as a take, it honestly didn't do a whole lot for me. I think that it was a good idea, and I kind of made me question, like, do children inherently have empathy? Like, do they come out of the womb having empathy, or is it learned or unlearned? And when I looked it up, I kind of just got a bunch of different answers, so really inconclusive. But yeah, that's about it.
I think like sort of uniformly, a lot of Bradbury's writing for me is like sort of flat but effective. Like I think I understand what he's trying to convey, and and certainly like some of the vibes. I just think they're not super interesting. It does like it stirs some sense of like, oh, the injustice of it, and like there is something there. I think a lot of my memories of childhood are being like, oh, like this thing that I believe like no one else believes, and I have no tools to convince other people that they're the case. And like probably often I was wrong in my belief. So I think that some of that reminiscence kind of comes through. But I don't know. It feels like it feels like a sci-fi story from a very different era of sci-fi, and like it's just it's so uncool in its representation of Venus. Like it's quite different than the other short stories that you mentioned in its like total disinterest in the technology, like even in passing, like it really might as well be in any classroom. But the fact that it's on Venus is kind of the core idea. So yeah, I think out of all the stories we read, this one left me with the least impression. And it did make me think back also, like reading other Bradbury stuff and just being like, I think I get it, but I don't get like overall the fascination with it, and I'm not as like entranced by his vibes, the Bradbury vibes, as maybe other people. Yeah, I don't get as much vibe value as others seem to.
Yeah, I'm not a massive Bradbury fan in general either, but I did like this story a lot actually. And I think particularly it did just like speak to this sort of emotion that I felt a lot in childhood, but don't really anymore, which is sort of, I don't know. I feel like kids a lot are just sort of surprised by like the obvious consequences of their actions, and these actions like they might even be able to like tell you what the consequences are going to be, but then like it actually happens and they're like, well, like I didn't really mean for that. I feel like kids can be like sort of cruel and stuff a lot of the time and do like a bad thing, but oftentimes on scene, like the actual pain or something, like like these kids are like shutting her in a locker, and they're all like happy to shove the weird Earth kid in the locker. It's like totally fair. I might be shoving in her locker too if I live my whole life on Venus. But they're not really trying to like ruin her life for like the next number of years. And then like afterwards, after seeing that they've done this, they feel this regret, but they're also like, I feel like they're not really. It's like a weird sort of feeling where it's not like they didn't mean to do it. It's just like, well, I didn't mean for it to be this bad or something. But yeah, I thought it conveyed like the dynamic around children being mean and cruel like pretty well.
So my feeling about this story is that it's kind of not really written for adults. Like, I actually feel like this story is sort of written for children, in that I think a lot of media for children is kind of really written for adults. Like, they tend to focus on the sorts of conflicts and stories that adults would care about surprisingly often. Like, there's so many kids movies about like career advancement. I feel like this is crazy. Like kids don't know anything about career advancement, or like romantic love, right? There's like so many stories about romantic love. And obviously like a lot of little girls like princess movies, but it's just because of like the princess aesthetic, which like includes the romantic love, right? But not really like engagement with those kinds of themes. And I think you rarely see the opposite, where it'll like approach the sort of thing that an adult would care about, or the sort of thing that a kid would care about at the expense of what an adult would care about. And I feel like this story actually does this. And that like fundamentally, the story is just about like missing recess. Like adults don't care about this. Like they do not care about missing recess. But like when I read this, I was just like, holy shit. Like I did read this like as a kid. Like I think I read it in like third or fourth grade. And like I read it, and I'm just like, holy shit, what if there was only recess like once every 7 years and you missed it? That's horrible. Like the stakes were just like so high because recess was something I thought about a lot. And like missing recess was something I thought about a lot. And also, I think that it's very short, not just in the sense of like the length of the story being short, but like the time over which it takes place is very short. It's like an hour. And I think that generally when you have a story written for adults that's like an hour, it's like super high compressed action. Otherwise it would like be longer, right? But I think in the case of kids, like narratives just tend to unfold in like that amount of time. Like that's kind of like a normal amount of time for a narrative to happen. Like I remember like kind of being like surprised by when I did some like counselor stuff, being older. Like there's a lot of blocks of time that are just like 15 minutes. It'll just be like 15 minutes of recess. And like this just feels totally crazy to me now. 'Cause I'm just like, what can you do in 15 minutes? But like everyone's pretty satisfied with this. And it's like a pretty good length of time. And I like think back and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I did have like 15-minute recess. And this was just like felt like a lot of time. But like, I think that these sorts of things, like the not thinking as much about recess and also like the compression of time that happens, I think that the story is actually like kind of harder for adults to connect with. I don't know if you guys felt the same way.
Do we think that like the setting aids to that, like sort of brings the adult into the like a children's world of just like the weather is different than on Earth, like, you know, we're sort of more open to this different sense of time and different reality in a different way, or is that nothing?
I, I think it could be. I mean, I kind of agree with you that it is sort of like, man, the science really does not like come much into play in the story. It's just kind of just there. Like, why is it raining on Venus? Like, but
I mean, a
yeah,
lot of clouds.
yeah, a lot of clouds, clouds, rain. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
So I
what do you
actually
guys?
just learned that um, we didn't find out what the weather was on Venus until like right before Bradbury wrote this short story. So it's possible that he wrote this like as we were discovering what the weather was actually like on Venus, and he was like, that you know, this is a entirely possible that it just rains all day.
It's pretty interesting. It rains. Wait, it's like very sulfur. The atmosphere is like mostly sulfur, right? Or is that not? I don't really know anything about Venus.
Yeah, I have
Can
no
someone
It's
idea.
like
give me a
Earth.
Venus
It's like
primer?
I think it's all carbon dioxide, but it's like 700 degrees, so it's like definitely not raining
Okay.
liquid water. But presumably I was assuming some sort of terraforming project had taken place in
Yes.
this
I also
story, in the world of this story. But
I'm
I don't
imagining him
know.
like sending this off to the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and then the memo comes in that it's like 700 degrees on Venus. He's like, ah, shit. Like, it's too late now.
Scrap it. Yeah. Gordon, kind of following on what you said, like I think that the so, something like the teacher is so immaterial, like the teacher kind of just like fades to the background, and I think that's something that is connects all of these stories is this theme of like humanity as a child, and like this is I get the sense that this is, I mean, this that just like resonates in the same way where like we are the children are, there's no like villain amongst the children, like the cruelty of the children is just almost like a natural force, which is like kind of what it's like to be a kid too, like people, you know, the sort of relationship, it's very, the diplomacy is fast, and you know, friend and foe flip often, and I think that like that there's no named villain, it's just like this human experience of what is, you know, what is life amongst the stars, and I think that's like it's not so dramatic as in the other stories, but in, you know, in kind of the understated suburban uh, uh, sense that Bradbury brings. I think, yeah, it's effective in that way. Everyone's kind of in it together. They hurt themselves in their cruelty.
Oh. Yeah, Trevor's been alluding a little bit to other stories that we may talk about. So there are a couple stories that we read by Cixin Liu and then also Ken Liu, and I think that sort of related to that, although I don't want to go too much on a tangent, is um, Cixin Liu is often criticized for not writing super great characters, and I guess I kind of thought that, like, I'm not exactly sure what I thought his response to that would be, or like if he got that same criticism in China. But I actually read this interview with him that was like kind of adversarial, where they just straight up say like, "You're kind of known for your characters just like not being very good. Like, what do you have to say about that?" Particularly as it comes to, yeah, and then he's just kind of like, well, like that's not really what I'm trying to do. And he was saying that more than anything else, he kind of wants like humanity and like the universe to kind of like be two characters. And most of his stories are just trying to like explore the relationship between those things and like relate the story of the universe to the story of humanity as though they are characters. I think that's like a pretty interesting way to look at his fiction. But yeah.
For those of you who have read Something Wicked This Way Comes successfully, unlike myself,
Uh-huh.
is what's how different is like the sort of relationship between humanity and like individual characters, and Like having read the first quarter of it a couple times, it seems like there's like darkness and humans, and it's like not clear what the line is. But I'm just curious how similar those themes are.
You mean between the novel and between this story?
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, they didn't even seem like they were written by the same person to me. Like, this story felt kind of flat, and Something Wicked This Way Comes felt like the exact opposite. And the prose was completely different to me. Like, this story, it didn't really seem overwritten, which I think is the biggest problem people have with Something Wicked This Way Comes, is that it's like a lot of purple prose. And this story didn't really seem like that to me, and it also, maybe that's why it felt flat. Um, and Something Wicked This Way Comes kind of had like this surreality to it that fit the narrative perfectly. Because if you read like Fahrenheit 451, it doesn't really have that. It's not as overwritten. It doesn't really have this like weird dreamlike feel to it. And this story definitely didn't have that. And I think that he almost did that in Something Wicked just because it matched the story so well.
So just for some context, so Something Wicked This Way Comes is a Red Bradbury novel. So I would say it's one of his more famous novels, though certainly not nearly as famous as Fahrenheit 451. And it follows these two friends who, I guess without giving spoilers, encounter this sort of like creepy traveling night carnival in like the middle of Illinois. Um, and it's kind of fitting for this episode, honestly, because it's set very close to Halloween. In fact, the time that I cracked it open was like the same day that the book begins. I was just like, whoa, it's like October 24th. I guess if you all will humor me, I have like kind of a ridiculous anecdote for why I was like not able to finish this book.
You need like a little like a theme music or a sting for this kind of thing. Let's go.
Yeah. So I was like reading this book like 2 nights ago, and the power went out in my building, and there was just like this faint alarm that just started playing in the background, and I was just like, oh man, like this when I was reading it. And so I was just like, this seems kind of bad. Like I don't know what I should do. And so eventually I just like find a flashlight and like stumble out into the lobby, and it's like way more dark than I'm expecting. Like there's just very few emergency lights, and then slowly people just kind of start like stumbling in from like other units. They're just like, like what do we do? And someone's like, the internet's also out, and like there's not very good signal in the building, but like someone has a good plan. So just like, oh, it looks like there's an outage in like half of the neighborhood, like Pike Pine, which is like one of the most central neighborhoods in Seattle. And they were just like, looks like it's not going to be fixed until like 4 a.m. We're just like 4 a.m. Like, oh man, what's going to happen? And it's like super windy and stormy outside and quite cold. And the first thing we learn is that the door actually did not go on the backup power. So the door is actually just locked. Like there's no way to get in. And there's no one at the office. It's like just 10 p.m. on like a Friday or like a Saturday, and my unit is like right by the door, and so it just kind of ends up being I just kind of have to be like the security guard for this place of residence because like there's just like no other way to get in. So like basically I just like am sitting in this like completely dark room, like sitting on this chair. Like eventually most people leave once it's kind of clear that like nothing can be done. I'm just like clicking on this flashlight. I'm like reading this Ray Bradbury book, and then like every 5 minutes, or no, okay, not every 5 minutes, but like every like 10 or 15 minutes or so, someone will just like knock on the door and look like very panicked, and I'll just like look out and be like, is this person trying to murder me? I'm just like, okay, it's probably fine. I just like open it, and also the whole time this alarm is just being like, like I can even hear it like inside my room. So I'm like, okay, this is probably not going to get any sleep. And there's like this one group of people that come in that are just like looking kind of afraid and disoriented. I'm just like, like you guys need to get somewhere, and they're like, yeah, we're going to a party in like 302, and I was like, okay, sure, I can like take you guys there. So like we go up through the stairs, and like before, like on the first floor it was like kind of dark, but like you could still sort of see because of like the street lights. Up in the stairs, like by like the where I was taking them to the party, it was like a horror movie. Like you just like open the door and there's just like this completely dark hallway, and they're just like, holy shit. And then we just like walk through and we have to go through like a series of like 3 doors to like get to their party. And then like, yeah, so I just like escort them to the party and they're just like, ah, thank you. And then more people keep coming. Like this is a big party. And so like it just ends up being where like I'll just be at the front and then some people will come in like ridiculous costumes and like, you guys going to the party in 302 hosted by Kathy, and they're just like, yeah. And then I would just like gonna be like, all right, we're going through here. And then I would just like, take this really like kind of complicated route through like a completely dark building. And they're just like, wow, you like really memorized the layout of this place. So it's just like, yeah. And they're just like, like, are you Will? I'm just like, no, I'm not Will. Like, to be clear, I'm like not even at this party. And they're just like, wait, what? And then I just like dipped. And so like, yeah, it just ends up being the case that I'm like, yeah, escorting all these people like up to this party, and like, yeah, there's just like these howling winds, and like, yeah, like those parts of the night were pretty chill, I would say. But like for a lot of the night, I was just kind of like sitting in this chair and like next to this like kind of scary siren, and like waiting for people to like come in, and like hoping that I was like, yeah, not gonna like let in the wrong person. And it actually never got. They actually never sent anyone. Like we called them, and they could only spare like a security guard for like the other building, which I think like pays more in rent or something. And so we were basically just cooked until like the power was fixed at like 4 a.m. I think I eventually just like called it like pretty late in the night, but like, yeah, I don't know. It was pretty cooked, but also like weirdly good atmosphere for reading this book. Unfortunately, I did not quite finish, but yeah. And also the power went out again like the next night, and like it was the same situation.
Yeah, dude.
Did you?
It sounds like Ray Bradbury was trying to like set you up to read this book. You started reading it the day that it's set in. It's like
yeah, I started
storming
reading
outside.
But from what I did read of this book, I do think that a pretty successful kind of narrative that I think does still appeal more to kids, but also appeals to adults, is like this sense that something is just kind of wrong, and you can't really convince anyone of this, or you're just like not even able to articulate how this is the case, but like everything is just like wrong, and it's like not gonna go back to how it's supposed to be. Like kind of like the nightmare feeling where like you're in a nightmare and stuff is like a bit different. It's not like there's nothing like super flashy that actively bad is happening to you, but you're like, something here is just like kind of fucked up. And I think this is a pretty scary feeling. I also feel that like children's horror is just kind of a superior genre to adult horror in the sense that it's just more effective. Like I think that the ceiling for how scared you can make like the average kid with like kids horror is just like way higher than you can achieve for like an adult. And so I think like Coraline, for example, is probably just the scariest movie in terms of like how scared the average like audience goer was when they saw it, because you just can't really scare that people that much when you're an adult. And I even remember like coming over to watching adult horror movies. Like I was very scared of movies as a kid, even if they weren't horror movies. Like I was scared of like the Curious George movie. Like I was very scared of a lot of movies.
Wait! I have a memory of the Curious George movie being really scary too. Actually.
Wait, you watched the Curious George movie? We probably were like the exact same age.
I was not scared of a lot of movies either, but like something about the Curious George movie was kind of scary.
Okay. Maybe this is not like as embarrassing. But yes, I remember when I watched adult horror movies, I kind of had an expectation that they would make me like at least like similarly scared to how scared I was when I watched like movies as a kid. And this isn't the case. They're just like not as scary, and this is kind of disappointing to me, I guess. Like there were a couple horror movies where I'm just like, and now I'm gonna like revisit that like really scared feeling from when I was a kid, and just like never materialized. I guess it kind of felt anticlimactic because like as a kid, I was always just like, someday I will like be old and like not afraid of these like really really scary movies, and like it'll be. But I imagine it as like I still imagine it as being this very like difficult challenge. You know, like I'm finally like I don't know 20 years old or something, and now I can just like finally watch like Hereditary or like The Exorcist, but it's just like so difficult to like continue watching. But like I don't know, it's just like this movie. I don't know if you guys relate to this at all.
Have you guys seen the movie Monster House? It's like an animated kids movie.
Oh my gosh, yes,
That movie's
yes.
fucking terrifying, dude. That thing's scarier than like I'll put that up against The Shining or anything. Like there's an old elderly neighbor that like looks through your walls and watches you do shit. I'm like, they're showing this to 6-year-olds.
I actually just watched this movie, like this year, because I was doing like a movie night with my friend where the theme was I would pick movies that I like have kind of weird scattered memories of as a kid from like watching commercials and such, but I never actually saw. And like this was the one I remembered the most vividly. It was Monster House because it just seemed like so scary. And we watched it, and really good movie. Actually, a really good movie, but definitely much too scary. Did you know it was actually written by Dan Harmon? Like the
Oh, for
Community.
real?
Yeah.
Community and Rick
Yeah.
and Morty guy?
Yeah.
Damn. That's crazy.
So like
That's like completely different vibes.
yeah, like the dialogue and the humor is all like super on point. Like it's just like really well written. But definitely too scary. Like some of that movie is really scary. Like the actual house, it's like about this house that just kind of like eats people. Like they just like go in the yard, and then when the adults are like not looking, like just the carpet will just like come out and just like yoink them into the house. And like yeah, sometimes there's stuff in like the grass that just like I think the grass like comes up and like pulls people down. And like yeah, there's like this one part in particular where like they call like actual cops to like come, and there's like the standoff where like the house is kind of trying to like disguise its true nature like while the cops are like surveilling it, and so it just like fucks with a bunch of stuff. And like it's a situation where like the cops could have actually like caught the house, but the house is just like slick about it, and then like the cops eventually just like drive away. The kids are like, no, 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 fuck, no. Yeah, have you guys seen this? Have you guys heard of this movie?
No.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I can't watch scary movies. I have no. Just ruins me. And like my something. I literally can't watch them.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Is it like? Would you say that's true for like thrillers as well?
Yeah, I mean, with some exception, yes. Like the feeling of suspense is like not what I want to. I don't want to experience that. And yeah, with some exception, like Shutter Island is like definitely one of my favorite movies. I think because like the genre is so strong, and like there's so much framework there that I'm like I can kind of hold on and like look away when I need to. But for the most part, like I think like a cinematic experience that is like suspenseful to me is like really not not my thing. I just can't. I have to like leave the room. And the yeah. But Monster House, I do remember seeing a lot of ads for that. I must have
Yeah,
been
there
in
were
like
a
an
lot
era.
of ads.
Yeah, I didn't even have TV, so I don't know where I would have seen them. But yeah, they did a good job. They spent a lot of money on those
They
ads.
were scary ads. Like they were really scary ads.
Another movie that scared the shit out of me that was like definitely catered to kids was like Wallace and Gromit, and I don't even think that was supposed to be like a scary movie. I just think the claymation scared the shit out of me. And I have this thing where I was just thinking about this the other day. There are kind of like two categories of scary movie, and one is like a cozy scary movie that makes me feel like warm and fuzzy, I guess, like kind of like when my wife will watch like a Disney movie or something. Like there are like cozy scary movies. They kind of just make me feel at home. It's like good to watch on an afternoon, you know what I mean? And then there's like scary movies, and I would say like Hereditary and like Midsummer would go in the scary category, but like The Shining for some reason and Us go into kind of the code. Like those seem to me like cozy movies, and I honestly don't know what the dividing line is.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, this is kind of cozy. I thought the ending was a bit scary, but yeah, there were parts of it that were cozy. I think that adult scary movies do kind of like lock into like a different primary emotion though. Like I think that adult movies kind of are trying to put you on edge, like you were saying, Trevor, like create this feeling of like suspense and thrill, kind of like a roller coaster. Whereas I feel like kids movies that are supposed to be scary are more kind of aiming to like disorient, or you're supposed to feel that things are kind of just like not right, like Coraline, or even some parts of like Pinocchio, or like you just kind of end up in this like weird alternate place.
Going back to the book though.
Yeah, I think it is a
Yeah.
pretty prototypical example of this kind of scary story.
I actually don't think so.
Oh, you don't? You
Or-
don't? Okay.
Or I mean, I think it kind of was, but I think it was not that scary. I mean, it wasn't that scary for me now, but I think it wouldn't have been that scary even as a kid because Will's dad, like Mr. Holloway or whatever, he's just like he's there from day one. Like he's on their side, through thick and thin. And he kind of like never loses his composure. Like he's just there in the moment. Great dad the whole time, always believes him and stuff. And it was like very like wholesome father-son relationship and whatnot. But because it wasn't the situation where the kids were like all alone with like no one else, it ended up not being, that scary. Outside of like maybe some stuff in the very beginning before like that setup took place. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was like kind of so on this book, to be honest, overall. I think I'm pretty mid on horror as a genre, just period. I really like horror as like a secondary thing in stories. Like I really like when some fantasy book or some sci-fi book, and then just like sucker punch out of nowhere, there's like some really like horror thing, and then that like will really get me, and I'll really like that. But if something's just horror from the start, and that's kind of the main thing, I start to like, it starts to get sort of tiring and less interesting. So I basically for this story, I loved all the parts where it's just like Will talking to his dad and stuff. Best parts, like the carnival, whatnot. Like, take it or leave it. But yeah.
But yeah, as far as Something Wicked This Way Comes, I didn't really look at Something Wicked This Way Comes as a horror novel really at all. There's really one scene where someone's eyes and mouth are like glued shut, and that one's pretty messed up. That's always something that always gets me. But I kind of read it when I was reading it. I just saw it as a coming of age novel, kind of like Stand By Me or Tom Sawyer. I kind of read it as something more like that, and I can see why people maybe don't like this book. Like the plot is a little muddy. Sometimes I don't really know what's going on. Like it's almost a little too surreal. It's too overwritten. There are whole chapters where there's like 4-page tangents that are just about being an adult or being a child that has nothing to do with the plot. But I guess I subconsciously viewed it through this lens of being a coming of age book and being about the difference between childhood and adulthood. And there's a big scene where Will's dad, Charles, talks to him in the front lawn, and he's like, "Hey man, I believe you." And then he like eventually decides to climb the ladder to get into the house or whatever. And it's kind of a big like flip where he's like saying, "You know what? I still have some of this little kid in me." And it was very like I think I shed a tear at that scene because I was just so I was like, because this whole time he's been like worried about his heart. He's an old man. He kind of all of his life is behind him, and he kind of decides like, you know what, I'm in on it with these kids. I'm gonna do it, and that to me was kind of his hero moment when it kind of flipped. And then that's when the book got really good. Up until then, it was kind of just middle of the road book for me. Like it was really well written. I don't mind the purple prose when it comes from Bradbury. I don't know why. I just something about the cadence that he writes with, I really like. But like the first 2 chapters I read, which is also only like the first 4 pages of the book, but the first 2 chapters I read, I was pretty unimpressed and I was confused by what was happening. Like there was like a lightning rod salesman. I didn't really know what the story was. And then chapter 3 is the chapter that really hooked me, and it's just Charles, Will's dad, sitting at the top, like sitting on the top floor of the library, like looking down at them as they're like sprinting across the town at midnight or whatever. And he's like, all the chapter is him sitting there reminiscing, trying to get back to like, where did everything go wrong? How do I get back to this feeling that they have of just running for the sake of feeling the wind on your face instead of running for exercise or whatever. And then he talks about how the reason adults drink is because the only time they can get that feeling of being a child is after they've had a couple drinks, which I was like, damn, that's. But anyway, that part evoked something in me, and I'm not joking. I like jumped to my feet and I grabbed my dog and I took him to a dog park and I was just like running around like an hour, just being a dumbass. But this, I actually saved a small paragraph. Um, this is the part that kind of hooked me. It says, this is from chapter 3, like towards the beginning. It says, so there they go. Jim running slower to stay with Will. Will running faster to stay with Jim. Jim breaking 2 windows in a haunted house because Will's alone. Will breaking 1 window instead of none because Jim's watching. God, how we get our fingers in each other's clay. That's friendship, each playing the potter to see what shapes we can make of the other. And that chapter really, I think, is kind of what took my mind to be like, okay, this is a coming of age book. This is about keeping your youth as you age. And I think if I was trying to read it as a horror book, I don't think I would have enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely enjoyed the coming of age aspects a lot. Yeah, the Jim and Will friendship I feel like was really well done. Where it's like this sort of kind of unequal friendship where Jim's kind of always dragging Will along into trouble, but Will also sort of needs him because otherwise he just wouldn't be doing all that much interesting at all. And I feel like I definitely had some friendships like that as a kid. Honestly, from like both sides of the coin. Like I there's like definitely one friendship I can think of where I was kind of being pulled along into things, and then like another one where I was the one doing the pulling.
I was just gonna say it's also possible this book hit me so hard because the town is explained exactly like the small town I grew up in Missouri. It's a small town. Like even the buildings, they're almost described as being in the same order, and it just called to mind like the exact same, very similar friendship that I had with this other kid when I was in like elementary school. Like exact same dynamic we had going on. We just running around in the middle of the night doing dumb shit. I just think it was so like reminiscent of my childhood that's probably another big reason that I was kind of biased towards overlooking some of the things that people don't like about it, I guess.
Did you all have experiences with like circus or carnival type thing coming to town at all as a kid?
Yeah, hell yeah, I did.
How'd it go? What do you remember about it?
Well, a couple things. Mostly just that, like, it was a good time, and it was kind of sketchy, but it was like the only time that this weird triangle of land in the middle of town by the only traffic light was ever used, and it was like right abutted next to this lot that was like a gift shop, and to make it look like it was covered in snow year round, they had like put like an unimaginably large volume of spray foam on the roof and then painted it white, but it just looked like a toxic hat to this weird sheet metal building in the way that, like, anyways. Yeah, but also like the town I grew up in like had a real circus streak to it. Like there were circus classes and like a bunch of not circus, well, Cirque du Soleil, but also Quixotica folks lived there, I think, or like at least part of the year. And so there was just like a lot of circus stuff, and like circus grunge was like one of the archetypes you could choose in high school and middle school for sure. So like there's something there. But yeah, I don't know if I had any like weird like carny experiences though. But definitely sort of an end of the road vibe to the circus.
Yeah, I remember there was one time.
Circus grunge, yeah. TM. You can imagine it. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We all made our choices. What were you saying, Gordon?
I remember there was one time where like there was like Barnum and Bailey sort of came nearby or something. I mean, I don't think it was like an exact town. It was just somewhere in the Chicago suburbs. But like everyone on my block sort of went to this, or at least like most of my friends who were neighbors, and I did not go. And they kind of like were talking about how like it wasn't all that really, but I was like still really jealous, and I was like I didn't really believe them. So like I thought they were just I was just like really convinced they were just like lying to make me feel better, and like somehow this made it like worse if they just like because like I thought it was like they went to the circus and it was awesome and they had like such an amazing time, and then they were just like but like oh Gordon didn't get to go to the circus, so we have to go back and we have to tell him like oh it wasn't all that, like you know it was missable, it's fine, you missed it, and I was like so annoyed. That's all I remember about it. And then I eventually went to the circus at some point, like maybe 4 years later, and it was kind of mid. But for that period, I was like kind of really salty I missed the circus that one time.
I feel like that is also a pretty common kid emotion where I think one thing that's pretty common is like you'll establish that something is like all that like as a kid, and then like a lot of time will pass, and then finally that thing will happen, and you're just kind of like eh. Or it's the movie Monster House. But like I remember there was this one time in particular where like there was a thing where the young kids in my after school program went to this place called Enchanted Castle, and like the older kids went to this place called like Safari Land. And I remember going to Enchanted Castle when I was like in like first grade or something, and it was so awesome. And they have one of these like spinny tunnels that like circles around you as you like walk through the middle, and it was so cool. And I was like, wow, if us lowly young kids get to go to Enchanted Castle, I wonder how cool Safari Land is. But it just kind of as it happened, I never ended up really going to Safari Land. Then when I was a senior in high school, I wanted to meet up with a friend who was from like a pretty far suburb. And I was trying to figure out where we should meet. And then I figured out that almost the exact midpoint between where I lived and where they lived was Safari Land. And I was just like, holy shit, let's go to Safari Land. This is going to be so hype. And it was so mid. Like it was just a,
Would
it
it
was
have been
just
really hype if you were in fourth grade?
I don't know. Like
Was it better?
probably not.
Because Enchanted Castle was pretty good, I feel like.
It was not better than Enchanted Castle.
Not better than Enchanted Castle.
No, it was definitely not better than Enchanted Castle. It was kind of just like a glorified jungle gym, I would say, which we actually couldn't even go in because we were too old.
I do want to talk about Cixin Liu stories, but I also have some other.
Yeah.
I have a little incoming hypothesis or like theme. One of my big themes right now in my own life, like especially exploring the Midwest for the first time a little bit, is that like there's this disappearing margin, and I think maybe perhaps one of the reasons that like in our generation broadly we don't have like all these carnival stories is because like the carnival one is probably like much better regulated than it was in 1956 or something like that, but I think there's just like less sort of alternative lifestyle like capital just like manifestations of those worlds than there used to be. And I think that like our stories certainly reflect that, like it's just hard to imagine a story like Something Wicked This Way Comes being written today. We don't have that kind of like mystery about other people's worlds in the way that maybe we did back before we were alive. I mean, I don't know, but I do think there is like a disappearing margin, like you know, there's drastically less like small housing units, flop houses, etc., than there were 50 years ago, and all kinds. So in all these ways, there's like narrowings, yeah, and I think the stories are different because of it.
Yeah, I remember like thinking. I remember one time reading about like the initiation ritual into the Freemasons, and I think this is just something that you just like watch recorded online now, and I was like, that's kind of lame. Yeah, I don't know, like, like I think I was probably I think even if I had read that like 10 years ago or something, it would be pretty. Or no, 20 years ago, it would have. This may not have been the case, but like, yeah, you can just like see anything that you want. I mean, I think sometimes I have this feeling where I'll be reading like an account of something on the internet, and I'm like, I feel like I haven't earned the right to be privy to this information. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're reading like an article by someone who has this like totally different lifestyle from you. You've never even met someone who has something even close to this. They're usually like often like either kind of famous or like powerful or some way, and you're just like, like I don't know. Sometimes like that like voyeurism kind of feels like unearned. You're like, why do I just get to read this? Like I shouldn't be reading this. Sometimes I even feel like I shouldn't be able to. Yeah, so maybe that's kind of, I think that's sort of related to what you're talking about.
Yeah,
That's how I felt watching Succession.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, stuff like that. I think that's a great example.
Yeah, kind of sacredness is lost.
Yeah, or even just like even if you don't know it, like just like knowing the information's out there for pretty much
Knowing that you
everything,
can't know it.
like kind of removes the mystique. It's like when something's unknowable, it's a very different quality than if it's like knowable but you don't know it. Like one of these is a lot cooler than the other to read in a story, and I feel like almost everything has been moved from like into the knowable but you don't know it category.
I think that's propaganda, though. I think that's like media.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's not
propaganda.
actually true.
Yeah, I guess
But-
I think that it's not true. But like the powers that be do indeed want us to feel that way. Like, and that like the way to that knowledge is through them, is through the mediated experience. That's like very, yeah. But I agree.
I also think when at the time that he wrote this book, like stimulation was such a hard thing to come by that like playing a game of jacks was like the craziest thing you did all week as a kid. When now you can be like 6 years old playing Call of Duty and like having like dubstep blasting in your ears while you're like watching a ninja video on YouTube at the same time. You know what I mean? So I feel like that might have been like partially the death of the carnival, is that you can like just get way cooler stuff from your couch.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that people would also. I wondered like if older people would say the exact opposite. Though they'd be like, it was so easy to be stimulated. You could just like blow up barrels in the woods and stuff all day long, and now like you can't leave your couch. But I think it's kind of like generational in that way. I kind of agree with you though that it's a different.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there is a sense in which just like physical activity things, like I don't know, they do not like even remembering back when I was 8, like nowadays they do not let 8-year-olds do the same shit I did, and they definitely like didn't let me do the same shit my dad did when he was 8 either. Like each generation, it's just like, yeah, being a kid it becomes like safer and smaller and closer to home, and
Yeah, I have occasionally gotten like some dad lore where I like, I don't even think my dad was like a particularly adventurous person as far as like physical stuff. But like, I remember one time like hearing this anecdote of how like he was like on this hill and then like was somehow like hopped on a skateboard and then like went down the hill like onto this like ramp that just like shot over like some like street or like intersection that was like slightly busy, and I was just like what? You did what? And he just like, it's like, yeah. And then I just never hear anything about his childhood for like another like 5 years or something. But yeah, stuff like that. Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of awesome stuff, I would like to shift gears a little bit. I recently wrote a pretty long article about Cixin Liu and also a recommendation post where I talked about like the thing that I like about his stories is I think that he is kind of less afraid to make stories that are like, I guess, like awesome in the way that a kid would define it. Like I think that in pretty much any narrative written by an adult, especially science fiction, there's this preoccupation with making sure that everything kind of fits together. There aren't any like major plot holes, and things kind of can flow down from like a very neatly from like a theme or a concept. I think this is sort of true in Cixin Liu stories, especially in like the three body problem. But I think sometimes he just does some shit because he thinks it's awesome.
Yeah, fully does
Like,
not care, and it's awesome.
like there's a couple story, like there's this one thing that comes up a few times in Cixin Liu stories where like he really just likes the idea of like this alternate universe where like dinosaurs just like got to space and just like became this like super advanced civilization, and then they're just like talking dinosaurs, and like I'm pretty sure he just thinks talking dinosaurs are awesome because there's a couple times where there's just like these talking dinosaurs that show up, and you're just like why are there dinosaurs that are talking? And like it's just like, oh, and then from space there was a spaceship, and the spaceship had talking dinosaurs on it, and you're just like, okay. Like the first time I was like, okay, and then the second time I was like, all right, and then the third time I was like, okay, this is really getting to be a lot of talking dinosaurs. But I really admire that kind of. I think like my experience with Cixin Liu stories is, I think like the first few that I read, I was applying this more like adult frame of analysis where I was like, well, I don't know if you can really do that. Like, I don't know if you should really be able to tell a story like that. But at a certain point, I just kind of like relaxed into the vibe, and I was like, yes, this is exactly how she should be telling the story. It shouldn't be any other way. And the story that most gave me that impression was Cannonball. So I guess I'd like to offer any of you guys. Could you guys like explain what Cannonball is about? Whoever wants to go first.
I can explain the story.
Cannonball, okay.
So the story basically, I mean, I think we've talked about it on the podcast before.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can just skip.
But yeah, no, I'd still like to explain it. Though,
okay, you want to?
Because it's important. Yeah. So the story kind of starts on this like research station where there's like this dad, and he's like discovering this material that's just like denser than the earth, and can kind of like just like fall through earth as a result, because it's just like super incredibly dense. And then there's like this other like Argentinian scientist guy who's like, I don't know, there, and then there's like this kid who becomes the main, or doesn't become the main character, but is there as well. That's like the main character's kid, and he's just like, wow, that's so cool. Like, it's just like denser, and we could like maybe create some tunnel to connect China to Argentina or something, and that would be really cool. And then the dad gets like leukemia, and he goes into cryostasis for like forever. And then 50 years later or something, he's woken up, and after he's woken up, it's like, it's like a dystopia somehow, and it's sort of confusing. And then he gets kidnapped, and as he gets kidnapped, it's like, well, what's happening? And it's just, his kidnappers are just talking about how his son is just like this terrible person. And it's like, what happened? What'd he do? And they're like, no, we'll show you. And then they just like take him somewhere, and they take him to this giant tunnel that goes through the whole fucking world that his son created. And yeah, he's like, oh, that's kind of cool. They're like, no, it's not cool. Like, he ruined the economy for this. None of us have jobs because your son was too charismatic, and his useless dream just ruined everything.
The story just moves in a very particular way, I think. Like, I think that when kids write a story, there's just like a very deterministic, like, oh, if you did that, then this would happen. Like, oh, if you dig a hole through the earth, then the economy would be ruined. And I think that kind of storytelling is really interesting and kind of cool in this situation, even though it's sort of conventionally thought of as like bad storytelling,
I think a lot of his stories.
Premise of both of these stories that the premise that both of the stories that we read, Mountain and Cannonball, they easily be described as being like a 19-year-old ripped a bong and came up with this premise. Like, there's a giant hole in the earth. We bored all the way through the earth. Or, there's a wave that's 30,000 feet high, and I'm going to swim up it and talk to aliens. Yet, he kind of just sciences the shit out of it until it becomes, like, genuinely believable sci-fi.
Yeah, did you guys like Cannonball? I guess first of all, like, were you guys able to kind of like get into the right headspace to enjoy the story, do you think?
Yes. I read Mountain first, and I think that's like the right order to ease you back into Cixin Liu world. Yeah, I think that both of them are, well, yeah, there's a lot. I really enjoy both of them. Yeah, they are definitely like one huge. They're, they're like one huge Bender stories in a way, but I think that they have like a sense of, there is like the cause and effect that you mentioned is like so, like his sense of storytelling. I sort of wonder if they're all like sort of about like a perspective on history and how history is transmitted to kids in a way, because like in both of these stories, like the character but also like all of humanity are the children, and like they're experiencing these things, and someone's like, this is history and this is what happened, and like this is how the world works, and like this is how the space canon works, and you're just like totally along for the ride, and you totally accept it because it explains what you see like very perfectly in a way that he like, you know, sort of pointedly shows the flaws in like a few times. Like there's like a few parts of the story where he's like, obviously this is just like not how it works, but like this is the explanation you get, and like you'll be happy with it, and you know, now you're in space, so obviously like it all works together. But it does, I think there's something like very sort of subtle in that way in the stories that seem just like, yeah, like wouldn't that be crazy, bro? Like, there's a lot there. So yeah, I love them.
It's actually kind of hilarious when you think about the fact that the character goes through all of the events in this story in like a 3-hour span. Like,
yeah, that's true.
he has to like say goodbye to his wife and kids, and he wakes up and he immediately gets like kidnapped and told that his son, who was a little boy the last time he saw him, like single-handedly destroyed the entire like humanity. And then he gets sent through the Earth's core to Antarctica, and then he gets launched into space. Like literally launched into space, like all in the span of like 2 or 3 hours. That's just hilarious to me. There was one other thing that I thought was really funny that I wrote down, and it's that he is writing about how it can't actually just be a straight line because they have to account for the curve of the Earth. And then the narrator says, the next line is, that's some fantastic engineering. And that's literally just Liu patting himself on the back.
Yeah, just being like, don't worry about it. Like, I thought of it. I thought of everything. And you're just like, what? And at the end of the story, the character is like stoked. He's not like, wow, this is like way too much for me. He's just like far out. Like, I can't believe how awesome humans are. Like, like we've made it. He never really buys into anyone's shitting on him or his lineage.
I think what's even better about that is like just right before he's like talking to this dude, he's about to shoot him or he's about to like shoot him in the cannon or whatever, and he's just like, they're explaining the mechanics of the cannon, and he's just like, yeah, I read something like that in this Jules Verne novel. That was like the stupidest shit I'd ever heard. But then as soon as he gets launched in the cannon, he's like, never mind, this is hype as fuck. It's not stupid. But yeah, I guess I was really thrown by this collection in that like especially like I feel like in like especially it's around the time that Three Body came out, and maybe now that Three Body's having an adaptation, like Cixin Liu's marketed in like a very serious way. I feel like one of the biggest things they talk about is how like Obama read his books, and like Obama just has all these takes about like, I don't know how you can get into kind of like the Chinese mind by like reading these books, and like maybe understand some things about like geopolitics. And like even the tagline for The Wandering Earth, which has Mountain and Cannonball, is with a melancholic and keen understanding of human nature. Liu's stories show humanity's attempts to reason, navigate, and above all, survive in a desolate cosmos. You just like read that, just imagining someone who's like, I don't know, like a classic, like, NPR listener, New York Times reader, and they're just like, yeah, I heard Obama really liked this guy. I want to like learn something about the Chinese mind. And you just like crack open the story and smell like digging a hole through the earth and just getting launched into space. You're just like, what? Like, what am I reading? I was surprised, and I was surprised, like, in the reviews, like, I just thought there would be a lot more, like, negative reviews of people being in that situation, where, they're just kind of expecting this very, like, sober take on, like, human nature, and instead they just get Cannonball. But, I think that this book was just kind of, like, probably not super popular. I think Wandering Earth was not really as popular as people had hoped it would be, especially considering like how crazily popular it is in China. So I think honestly, like, yeah, I don't know. I think the tour maybe did a bad job of marketing Cixin Liu. Because I don't think that any of his books really did that well, other than like the Three Body Problem series. Like I think I've gotten that sense, and it's like, yeah, if you see Cixin Liu in that way, you're probably not gonna like them.
Yeah, I mean, even Wandering Earth, which is the title story of this collection or novella, I guess, is just like, the premise is like, what if we had the Earth and the sun was gonna die and it was gonna blow up, and it's like we have to leave, but it's like we have to get all humanity out. Oh, what if we turn the Earth into the giant spaceship, and then we put some engines on the Earth, and they'd have to be so big, and they'd have to actually be so big that the surface of the Earth would become inhospitable because it would be too hot because the engines are so big to move the whole planet. So everyone's gonna live miles underground. It's a ridiculous setup for a story.
I think there is something there, like if there is any insight to be gained as to like these differences between East and West, I think like for me it's like sort of the power of ideas in recent history almost, and like I think that like least believable thing about these stories is just like you would bring that up and everyone would be like, that sounds pretty difficult, and like there's a lot of externalities, and like I don't know, man. Like, we're not really into like coordinating and stuff. We don't really do projects like, like it's just, that sounds really hard. Like, it would just never pass. There's just like no world in the West in which like, and even like, these days in the East in which like those kinds of ideas would like be able to transform society. But like, I think that there were sort of, in the last 100 years, ideas in the East that were more visually transformative than there were in the West. And like, there is kind of like a power of ideas that runs through all of these stories, especially like Three Body Problem. But even like when the moon floating the rock is like describing the history of Bubble World and being like the ideological schism between like the explorer, like even though materially these factions are like the same, like the ideological schisms are so important, and you're just like, okay, like I think that is like something that is quite different between East and West. Maybe, I don't know. I think that's like, yeah.
I liked I like me going into these. I kind of expected the same thing. I kind of expected like a quiet literary sci-fi that had kind of a lot of like quiet things to say about like the state of humanity, and then it's just like, I'm gonna launch this fucking guy into space. This guy's gonna swim up a mountain and talk to some aliens, and then like somehow swim back down or whatever. And I was like, people see like Cormac McCarthy or like Bret Easton Ellis as like dude bro lit, but I think this guy's the real dude bro lit.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think, this could go hard in like a dorm room. I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think, I actually found the passage where he swam up the mountain in Mountain to be really compelling. Like, I don't really think of Cixin Liu as like a prose stylist necessarily, and like obviously this is like partially him and partially the translator, but I thought the part where he was swimming up the water was like really, really cool. I mean, some of the way that he described like the water moving around, and like the way that like he was kind of going up and down in like the low gravity, like,
yeah,
I found it to be really compelling. I think that's like honestly maybe like the most compelling like single scene that I've read in sci-fi. Like, I just like, there's just something about it. Like, it's just so awesome, I don't know. It's just like so awesome. He's like swimming up a mountain. It's like low gravity. Like, it's hard for me to think of like a physical setting that's like more awesome than that.
The light from above and the falling superimposed on the eye of the storm. It's very, very movie poster. Yeah.
I think the West could probably benefit from having more stories that are based around like a concept or an idea instead of based around a plot or characters. I think that like Twilight Zone is a good example. Black Mirror, there's a lot of good examples in Black Mirror, but other than that, I don't think there's much of that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like it's pretty common for sci-fi short stories, particularly. But like, not too much else will be like ideas at the end, and even that, it's like a lot of the time it'll be about a character or something. But yeah, I really liked Mountain. I don't know, something about the beginning section with like the kind of like failed Everest like expedition too, and he's like kind of hated for this, which is fair because he kind of fucked up. But he's just like, and then it's just like this mountain shows up, and it's just a mountain of water. He's just like, I gotta swim up the mountain. It's like, yeah, of course you do. That's so fucking cool.
No, that's also very much like an archetype in Cixin Liu stories. Is like there will be a character that is just kind of built for like a single purpose. It's just like, oh, this opportunity arises. They like must do this. It's like, there is a mountain, like you must climb it. Or like I remember there was this one story where like the setup was that like these aliens come to Earth and they have all the secrets of like physics and stuff, but because of some kind of like prime directive, they can't actually share this knowledge. But then this one scientist is just like, like, what if you told me, and then you just killed me? How about that? And the aliens were kind of just like, okay, sure, I guess. And they just like opened up the offer to like anyone who like wants this to happen. And so like all these physicists just show up, including the main character. And it's just like the deal is like, we'll explain like all of physics to you correctly, and then we'll just like give you like 10 minutes to just like mull this over, and then we'll just like yeah, and then like the physicists do it, and like when they tell them like the secret, they're just not disappointed at all. They're just like, wow, like totally worth it. Like holy shit. And they're just like walking around and like, wow, so worth it. And just like, and just like, get killed. And like the main character, it's just like not even a question whether he would do this. It's like, well, obviously, like he's trying to uncover the mysteries of the cosmos. Obviously, he would like do whatever it takes. And like the narrator almost kind of like roasts you for like thinking that something else could happen. Like it just had to happen this way. Like his family's just like, no, don't like do this. Like you're gonna like leave us behind, and like you're only gonna have like 10 minutes or whatever to ponder these truths. And he's just like, obviously, like it's just like so worth it. Like this is just like what I'm built to do. Like yeah, such a strange story. I guess I just want to say like if you guys had any takes you wanted to share on the Ken Liu story that we read, Mono no Aware, or if you have to go, that's also fine. But if you guys had any interesting things to say about that story, I'd be happy to hear.
I love that story. That was my favorite of these four by far. I really like the trope of there's a huge existential threat to humans, and all they can do is fight. Instead of actually like doing anything, working together against it, all they can do is fight amongst each other. Um, it's kind of a thing in A Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, like everybody's warring against each other. Meanwhile, the others are about to kill everybody, so none of it's gonna matter. But like what happened in this story is there's an asteroid approaching the Earth, and instead of like everybody tried to kind of come together and figure out how to come up with escape shuttles so that everyone can escape, and then everybody argued over who was going to fund it and like who was going to get to be on them, and then it kind of turned out everybody got too busy fighting that nobody really came up with any kind of plan or decided that they would actually fund it, so everybody kind of died except for like these 1,000 people on this one ship. And I think that there are some themes that can be picked up from that. Climate change. We're fighting over dumb shit. Meanwhile, global warming's happening, all this shit. AI. But there was another thing. I wrote down an excerpt that I really liked. And he's also talking about he's kind of juxtaposing like the natural order of things against technology. And the first one, he is talking about, this is a flashback to right before the asteroid hit. So it's him as a kid, and he's talking about what he remembers. And it says, I looked around at the clean streets, the slow moving people, the grass, and the evening light, and I knew that everything had its place. And keep in mind, everybody thinks they're going to die here, yet he's at peace. And then This is another one from inside the escape shuttle after he, I think it was 20 years later or something. And the narrator's watching a grid of lights that kind of shows if they're like on the right trajectory. That's his job. And it says, today, the pattern of the lights feels off. One of the lights in the southwest corner seems to be blinking a fraction of a second too fast. And 2 paragraphs later, the section ends with this. I stare at the grid before me, at the one stubborn light that is out of sync, out of harmony. So he was more at ease, thinking he was about to die when he was kind of among the natural order of things than he was when he thought that he was in the like complete safety of his ship, yet he was surrounded by all this technology. I thought that was really cool. And that was just that was like a micro theme almost, where it was only a few paragraphs long. And then it kind of went back to the overarching thing of everybody's fighting amongst each other. Meanwhile, there's an asteroid that's about to hit us, and we could be working on something to kind of figure it out. I feel like there was nothing wasted in this story. Like, there were lines at the beginning that I'm like, why is that here? And then literally almost every single line tied back to something in the end, and it blew me away. Like, there were some paragraphs that, and this is kind of rare, but like there were some paragraphs that I read and I'm like, I have to be a better writer. Like, I guess, you know what I mean? Like, I got to step my game up because this is so good. Like, there's a poem towards I think it's like halfway through the story, and it's about a dandelion like knows it's about to die. I don't know exactly what it says, but a dandelion that knows it's going to die as its last act scatters its seeds in the hope that they catch in the upcoming spring. And it felt a little bit out of place at the time. Like, it was the dad saying that, knowing that he was going to die, but sending his son up, which I guess kind of makes sense. But then at the end, that's exactly what the narrator does when he patches the thing and saves everybody and sacrifices himself. Is he does exactly what the poem says. And it took me a second afterwards. I kind of clicked. I was like, oh shit, that was a perfect tie back.
Yeah, well, one thing that really, I mean, the ending of this story is like, I mean, I'm gonna spoil it here, I guess. But sort of like very, very classic, sentimental ending where like narrator goes out to like save the ship, like carrying all of humanity, and planning on the return trip, but he kind of like bumps into something and like breaks some of his fuel, so then he doesn't have enough fuel to get back afterwards, and sort of like his girlfriend's kind of just like, and the captain of the ship basically are telling him to come back, but he's like, nah, I gotta do it. And like fixes the ship and saves everyone. But something specific here right at the end that like really struck me, that I feel like was a detail that wouldn't be included a lot of the time, is he like cuts the cords and stuff because he's afraid that if he just like suffocates and runs out of air, like they might try to send out a rescue mission for him, and like this could be like really dangerous and stuff, and he doesn't want to get anyone to get hurt, and he knows he has no chance, like they don't really have time to get to him, so he just like does this so they don't do anything foolish. But I thought that was like a really cool sort of like minor detail, but just like really showing like the narrator's like amount of like care.
All right. Well, I think this is a pretty good time to wrap things up. I guess as a final thing, if you guys have any short story that you would like to recommend, feel free. And then also, if there's anything exciting that you've been working on that you'd like to plug, feel free to share.
Not me.
You gotta give me a second on the short story, because I told you like my 5 favorites.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Look at my bookshelf over here. I just read all of Night Shift by Stephen King a couple months ago. There were some really good ones in that. There's one called The Last Rung on the Ladder. Not a typical King short story. It's about a little boy and a little girl, and they're like brother and sister, and they climb up in the top rafters of this barn, and they jump into a huge pile of hay a bunch of times, and then it like ties it back into I won't give it away, but it's really good. I couldn't stop reading it when I started. And as far as plugging, I'm going to plug my novel, which I've also plugged on the last episode that just came out. But yeah, I think I kind of described it then, but it's essentially an epic fantasy novel. The main storyline is that There's a man named Stone Madison he's locked away in kind of this harsh like desert prison. And in the first chapter, he escapes and he's got to cross these huge swaths of land to go find his wife, who's also on the run. She's also a fugitive. And it kind of follows his how far he'll go to get to his wife. If, he makes a couple friends along the way, loses some friends. There's also a lot of other stuff going on, but that's really the main thread right there. Orange Sky, Dark Sun is the name of it, which I'm promoting a novel that I haven't finished writing yet. But
Okay. Heck yeah.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
someday. Hopefully, I'll finish it this year, and then I'll revise it for a few months. But yeah, I'm on part 3 of 3, and it's moving along pretty quickly.
Cool. Best of luck with the work, the great work.
Yeah, I'll send it to you guys for sure when I finish it.
Yeah, I don't have any plugs. If you're into sewing, you should go to flatland.studio. That's my current sewing project.
All right. Well, thank you guys both so much for coming on, and we will see you all sometime next season.
Welcome back. So, any thoughts on the episode, Kevin?
I guess I thought it was kind of interesting to get an outsider's perspective from 2 stories in particular that I spent a lot of time with. Mountain by Cixin Liu and Cannonball by Cixin Liu. I mean, thinking about it, I feel like these are 2 of the short stories I've actually spent the most time thinking about. And I've kind of been so in my own world thinking about these stories that I'm unsure if this is actually what most people would think. So I guess I was kind of validated to find that, yeah, people kind of had the same takeaway that Gordon and myself have had the whole time, which is like, yeah, kind of whack, but in a sort of endearing way. I was kind of like, I thought it was kind of unfortunate that I didn't really have as much to say about the Ray Bradbury novel as I was hoping I would have. So I guess I'm glad that Trevor and Dylan did have a lot to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was I thought it was especially kind of funny for Dylan, having not read any sci-fi stories, that he's just getting like tossed into the deep end with Cannonball and Mountain. Like at the end, he sort of said something that implied that, to me at least, that this is kind of the vibe he was expecting from sci-fi stories in general. And yeah, I mean, it's most stories are not quite so extreme. But yeah, it was fun talking about those for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot to talk about in the Ray Bradbury novel, despite none of us particularly loving it. Well, okay, don't like it. Yeah, don't like it. But yeah.
I did want to just read a passage from Mountain, because I felt like that was kind of a missed opportunity during the actual podcast, because I just feel like this part of the story is so good, like maybe better than almost anything else I've read. And I was just kind of like, I think rereading it, I was even more surprised, because I really don't think of him as like a super masterful prose stylist, but I think this really does kind of go toe to toe with a lot of stuff that writers who are known for this have written. And like, it really goes on for a while like this. But anyway, Fawn's ever lighter body was leaping from wave, crest to crest. As he jumped again, he suddenly realized that he was spending more time in midair than he was in the water. Up here, he could hardly tell if he was swimming or floating. Numerous times, the thin waves would come to completely envelop him, rolling him into a tunnel formed by the slowly tumbling waters. The gently roiling roof of these tunnels glowed in blue light. Through the thin, watery roof, he could see the light's source, the giant alien sphere hanging in the sky. The wave tunnel distorted the ship's form. To Feng Fan, it looked as if he was seeing it through teary eyes. Now, I don't think this paragraph in particular is cooking super hard, but I think it is pretty representative of this whole section, which really goes on for a very long time, where he's just like, and then I was in this cool water, and then I was in this other cool water. And it was like, I don't know, it was such a strange situation, too, that it was just so evocative. Like, I spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, truly epic.
One quote that I want to bring up also is this quote from Ball Lightning, which I think represents the vibe of a lot of Cixin Liu's characters but maybe none more than the dude in Mountain, who really, really feels that it is his life's purpose to climb mountains. Anyway, the quote is, "My life was a speeding missile, and I had no other desire than to hear it explode into its target. A goal with no practical purpose, but one that would make my life complete once I reached it. Why I was going to that particular place, I did not know, but it was enough simply to want to go, an impulse that lay at the core of human nature. Oddly, I had never gone to look up any materials related to it. It and I were two knights whose entire lives would be devoted to preparing for a single duel, and before I was ready, I would neither seek it out nor think about it." And this is regarding studying this one meteorological phenomenon. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, quite an insane quote. Specifically the idea of like that it's like fated, but he still has like no anticipation for the fact, like it's going to happen, but he's not like constantly thinking about it and stuff. It's just like it's already written in stone. He doesn't need to prepare. It's just his life is already assigned for this purpose, regardless of what he does.
And like the context is so funny too. Like, he's just like he's just like in a library, and then he sees like this beautiful girl who's just like interested in him because he just seems to be like built different. And then his reaction is kind of just like, "Yeah, I am built different. My life was a speeding missile, and I never But anyway,
Yeah.
I think this quote describes the main character of Mountain pretty well.
Yeah.
Like even better
sure.
than the main character of Ball Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, there is a way in a short story you're able to create a more kind of one-dimensional character. Like you can't really have a protagonist be like an even like decent protagonist and be like completely one-dimensional. But you can't in a novel, but you kind of can in a short story. Like he really just wants to climb a mountain, and he climbs a mountain, and that's all he does.
Yeah. I mean, as for Cannonball, I think we've talked about the story at length. I don't know how much we want to say about this.
Yeah,
story.
I mean,
But
yeah,
it sure is a story. It's one of the stories of all
crazy.
time.
It is one of the stories of all time, indeed.
Yeah. Did you have any final thoughts on Something Wicked This Way Comes? I guess what I found most interesting about Something Wicked This Way Comes, and maybe kind of why I didn't really latch onto it, is I knew it was about kids, and I kind of assumed it was like targeted towards kids, or at least be like sort of accessible to them. But I don't think it was very accessible to kids at all. Like it was a pretty hard book. Like it was quite hard to read, and the plot was also not super kid-like.
Yeah, I think the plot. I mean, yeah, also, but mainly just like the prose was quite like flowery and not straightforward. It was definitely like a book targeted towards people that like want to reminisce about when they were kids.
Yeah.
Like
and this is like a lot of Ray Bradbury's shit.
Yeah.
Like if you can believe it, I think if you can believe it, Dandelion Wine's even more like people who want to reminisce about being kids.
I mean, yeah, I think I said most of my main thoughts on the story, but I mean, to some extent, I kind of agree with Dylan that this is mainly a coming of age story, but I feel like it is still like structured as a horror novel. Like it is a horror novel. It's just like the good parts are the coming of age. So it's like fair to think of it as like a kind of like a coming of age story, but like the horror parts just don't really hit. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you guys were correct in that, like, well, I think in fairness of my sort of mediocre take of it being kind of structured like a prototypical kids horror media thing, is that I think the premise is very much having it lead that way. Like the way that it begins is very much like how something that is scary to kids would start. Like there's kind of these like, it's less about stuff being like directly like boo scary and more about like strange, like it's not even strange in the way that like you can't explain it, but it's kind of strange in a way that it, like the strangeness of it kind of meshes with like the strangeness of like kids versus adults, and I think there's just kind of like a way that the horror starts that does feel kind of like a horror book.
Yeah. I mean, I thought the book was actually going to be pretty. I thought the very start, like, I don't think it was scary, but like, I think it showed potential of a scary book, like the lightning rod salesman just like showing up, and it's like there's gonna be a storm, and you're just like, what? Why is there just like this lightning rod salesman? And then you just like, I mean, I guess he like sort of comes up later, but it really doesn't matter that much. And yeah, but like that sort of ambiance of just like strange events occurring with like no clear purpose.
I mean, I did find the story to be kind of scary, mostly because like I was kind of distracted and not able to fully gather what was going on while I was like underneath this blaring alarm, like during a power outage and freezing, and there were strange people like rapping on the door constantly and distracting me. And there were like flickering lights everywhere. So I thought it was pretty scary, but I don't think this is like the typical experience.
Yeah. All right. So you recently wrote this article called Cixin Liu's Paracosmal Worlds, which was the third part of your Chinese sci-fi series. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about that?
So in this final part of the series, I wanted to focus a little bit on Cixin Liu specifically because in the other works, I did talk about him a lot, but like I was kind of trying to have a more broad scope and just talk about like the ecosystem of Chinese sci-fi as opposed to like any author's writing in particular. And I think he's important enough that it's kind of like worth extending some of the stuff that's true about his writing to the genre as a whole. And I guess the biggest thing I want to convey is that most of the time when people talk about Cixin Liu, this just does not really comport with the sort of author that he is in my mind. Whenever people introduce Cixin Liu, like we mentioned in the podcast, it's always as some kind of like very like sober thought leader, which to be clear he is, but like he's like the sort of person that you would see come from like NPR and is recommended by like Obama and Bill Gates and like, oh, we got to like read this book to be educated and know about like the melancholy of the universe. And then this book in question happens to be just like swimming up a giant like space waterfall mountain, you know, for like no particular reason. And I think that the way in which Cixin Liu's stories move in particular is very unique and not very well conveyed by his marketed image. And I want to kind of like, my goal is to like isolate exactly why that is without being offensive, because I think that a lot of what I say about Cixin Liu's work kind of sounds unflattering, but I don't mean it to be like an insult at all. Like I actually think this is a really good and unique property of his writing, and this is actually the main reason why I read him. And what I decided upon is that his stories do kind of move in the way that a child stories do, even though they're not really about the same sorts of things. Like there is a way in which things move in a story of a child that is kind of like jerky, but at the same time predetermined. Like it was always meant to be that way. Even that thing that it is meant to be that way is totally crazy. So I'm hoping that this made sense to most readers. I think people generally liked it, but I can also totally understand like not really picking up what I was putting down because it's kind of like a difficult thing to articulate.
Yeah, I mean, he does really have a strange reputation. I feel like considering what he's written. I mean, I think particularly the three body problem, especially if you like only read the first portion of it, like you kind of read for a bit and start reading, is just pretty dissimilar from anything else he's written. And this is like, you know, by far the most famous thing about him. So it's like a lot of people, like I think if you got sort of recommended got the three body problem on the whim, read the first 100 pages and then like put it down, you would just like have such a distorted view of who he is as an author.
I mean, that was kind of me, right? Like that's kind of you too, right? Like, didn't we both read the three body problem? Like,
yeah. I mean, I read the whole thing. I think once you get that end, there's like more of the sense of like, you know, like the giant wire like cutting through the ship is like
that was pretty close to the beginning, I think.
That was like near the end of the three body problem, I think.
That was near the end, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah. But yeah, even as a whole, like even in, I mean, Death's End is crazy, but like even Dark Forest has like so much more of like, I don't know, the wall breakers and like the wall facer, or the wall facers are already ridiculous, but then like the wall breakers, and it's just like, I am blah blah blah, I am your wall breaker, you know? It's just like, it's so you know what I mean? Like they all have this like final conflict, and it's just like, oh, and he felt like an overwhelming feeling of despair, as like his whole life worth like came crashing down, and he knew he was nothing in the face of like eternity or whatever. Like it's just like the super melodramatic, like sort of childish but charming as well thing that is just not the way he's marketed.
Not to mention like Luigi's whole like pastoral fantasy that just like starts happening.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's another thing. That's
And
like
then I
the
imagine the
beginning of
girl
book
of my
two.
dreams. And then I asked the governments of the world for the girl of my dreams. And then they found her. And it was great.
Yeah, and I feel like somehow the craziest part of that, and then like she was actually the girl of my dreams, and we just like fucked off into the middle of nowhere and like got married and had like.
Yeah. Like that's I feel like that's also the Cixin Liu sauce is like he sets up a lot of situations where like in like a typical Western narrative it would just like not end up like it's supposed to.
Yeah.
You know, like there's gonna be something bad that happens because it's just like way too idealistic. But then in this is just like, yeah, and then she was the girl of my dreams and we had a great marriage. I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
Okay, now it's the input.
Oh yeah. Okay, that does sound quite different.
Unfortunate.
That's fine though.
Okay.
Oh wait, but now it's echoey. Unfortunate.
Oh, it's echoey? Okay.
Like, look, I'm coming through.
Well, I can put the headphones. Okay.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah. All right.
Wait. It's not even coming through my headphones.
Yeah, it's not. I can tell because I can hear myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there is this sense, and I think you talked about this in a lot in the first part, in the first part of these essays, but in Western sci-fi, you're always waiting for the other two to drop. Like once something starts being a bit too good for a bit too long, or once a character starts being maybe it's more even like once a character starts being like too arrogant or something, like wanting too much, kind of, it's like destined to failure. But like it feels like sometimes in Cixin Liu stories, you can make kind of just like a Faustian bargain or something and just get away with it scot-free. Like you just like make with a deal with the devil and he just like forgets or something. Dark Forest definitely had that vibe. Although, I mean, I guess eventually stuff, but like really not for a while.
Yeah. I mean, I guess another thing that I wanted to bring up in this article, but it maybe didn't get quite as much airtime as I was originally expecting, is I think that there's a way that I think kids' stories have a movement to them that adults will be kind of dismissive towards. And I think it even goes beyond. Terra Ignota is this 4-book series by this UChicago professor, Ada Palmer, professor of history. And I would say that similar to the Book of the New Sun, it kind of has this interesting future history vibe to it. It is set in the 2400s, but at the same time, the way in which it is told and the concepts it relates to are very old. Specifically, they're from the Enlightenment. And in this society, it's kind of at the point where a lot of the things that have historically divided society, like gender and religion, are not really super salient features of society anymore, but they still have the potential to create conflict. And a lot of the book is an exploration of these concepts, but
it's like in an interesting setting where they're just like not really facts of life, and so they can be examined with a little bit more of like an impartial eye. So there's a lot of like interesting playing with gender and religion and stuff like that. But as for the topic, the plot of the actual book, um, it follows this convict named Mycroft Kenner who has done something very heinous in his past, and he is chronicling a society that is pretty harmonious, but kind of slowly sliding into instability in ways that people don't fully understand. And so, to me, it kind of has like a history textbook vibe to it, like something that happens like right before a very significant event, even though the way it's told is like very kind of, I don't know, like ornate and unusual. So
Yeah.
Anyway, Gordon, do you want to tell us? I already talked a little bit about it, Gordon, but do you want to say a little bit more?
Yeah. So when I was writing the review for this book, the main thing I focused on was the narration because as you said, it is like a history, and it is literally a history and world as well. It doesn't just kind of read like a history textbook. It also kind of is that like someone could. It's expecting that the reader is someone who's reading to get a account of these events. But the narration's like very strange. Our guy Mycroft is just he's a pretty weird dude. He has his opinions. He has his idiosyncrasies. Anytime a character is introduced, he'll kind of just like assign them a gender based on their vibe. Even though people in the society are all, pretty much non-binary, go have like they them pronouns. He'll like give them a he, give them a she, and then these will occasionally change. Just someone who was previously a he will do a pretty feminine thing, and then they're a she, or vice versa. And this is pretty ridiculous. There's also a ton of arguments where you as the reader will just like go back and forth with Mycroft, like maybe over the course of a couple pages, like arguing some point. For example, he might be trying to justify his strange usage of gender in this way to you, and you as the reader might be annoyed. And there's a lot of times that words get put in your mouth, but somehow they're always like, at least most of the time, kind of right. I feel like a lot of the time Palmer is like, or Mycroft in the narration will be like, and you as the reader might ask like blah blah blah, and I'm like, I was asking that. How'd you know? And maybe this isn't true for everyone, but stuff like that really made the narration work for me. But I would say if you don't like this book, it's also probably what will drive you away. Like I was reading some reviews, and yeah, definitely the most common negative review was like, yeah, I can't stand this ridiculous narration. Like, just like tell us the plot. Don't just like digress into these ridiculous tangents in which you like argue with the reader. And it gets like somewhat like more pronounced throughout the series. Like in the third book, there's Thomas Hobbes reading alongside you as well. So he'll have arguments with like you as a reader and Thomas Hobbes as a reader. So now there'll be like a triangle going three ways, and the conversations will get that much more complicated. It's still pretty entertaining. There was, as you said, I do have like a forthcoming essay. So I didn't get into, I think, a few of my more like takes about the book, but particularly like the main one is a lot of the plot revolves around this character, J.D.D. Mason, who's sort of at the center of it all. It's kind of, the world is like detailing this world where the centers of power, like there's these 7 hives, which for now you can just kind of assume they're sort of like nations without borders. They're the political institutions of the time, and they all kind of sort of get like tangled together in this nepotistic web of corruption, sort of. And at its center is this kid who's, well, I mean, like 18-year-old basically by the time of the story, who's at least believes himself to be the god of a wholly separate universe to this one. and at least everyone around him, including the narrator, believes this. And I mean, he does do some strange things that, you know, would lead you as the reader to potentially believe this as well. And it's quite out of nowhere, and it just really leads to a pretty alien view on humanity. So like, you know, he'll just like, and the universe in general, like he just like really, really hates distance. Like distance is just his number one enemy, and like time too. Time also big hater of time, because like, you know, distance can lead to like separation and disharmony and people not knowing each other, because sort of in his perfect universe, everyone's kind of, you know, all together in like one harmonious ball, and there's nothing distinct about individuals and stuff, because, you know, people being separate and disagreement implies like a lack of unity and harmony. And yeah, I just found this a really interesting way to explore sort of what matters to humanity and like what we care about and whatnot through this alien lens.
Yeah, I think what this book does well is like it will just have some very ridiculous premise, which will allow for kind of like a more impartial look at stuff that is like pretty much always an iron law of our world, but then in this world it's like very not. Yeah, this book, I guess, with this book, one thing that I don't know if it bodes super well is that a lot of the negative reviews that I saw of Terra Ignota, especially the ones that came from the mainstream sci-fi community as the book was coming out, were along the lines of, I really want to like this book, but I kind of didn't really love it as much as I wanted to. And like, but like, I really wish that I did. Like, I think there were a lot of people who kind of like, yeah, wanted to defend the book more than they were able to, or like they wanted to be more enthusiastic about the book than they were. I guess I almost feel the same way. I'm very much in the target audience for this book. I mean, I thought the narration was amazing. It was definitely my favorite part of the book by far. But I guess what I didn't like about the book is that I thought that it was kind of hard to. I thought it was pretty hard to understand. I think that's a pretty uncontroversial statement. And I think that there are some books, like Book of the New Sun, where not understanding it is kind of like the intended effect, and it doesn't necessarily like make your reading experience like bad. But I feel like in Terra Ignota, like not knowing why or how something was going on was often just like not pleasant, or like it was kind of like not really possible to get into a lot of parts of the book. For example, if you like don't really totally get the like hive structure of the book, I feel like there's a lot of passages that are just like kind of incomprehensible. And I think that honestly, like, I feel like your enjoyment of the book is gonna like scale up, like pretty linearly with how much you understand what's going on, which I don't necessarily think is good. I think it should kind of be like, I guess I would have preferred the book to have more that you could like latch onto before you like understood what was going on fully. Because like I think like the opposite situation is you have some book where it is pretty complicated to understand, but there'll also be kind of like these very like hooky moments that are like not really necessary for you to like understand the lore, and that can kind of like pull you in a bit more and like get you to understand like more of the lore through example. And I guess I wish the book had more of those moments. But at the same time, like the narration did serve that purpose to some extent. And I mean, there are also just like a lot of the parts of the book that I liked. I mean, it was definitely like still one of my favorite books that I read this year. But there were definitely some times where I just kind of felt I was like overwhelmed. I was just like, oh my gosh, there is so much. There is so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, it's having this first book be like doing the events that are sort of like the precursors to like political instability potentially leading to war and stuff is just like a really hot. You're going for a really subtle thing. Like it's hard for this to be a really, and if you really want the subtlety and complexity, it's hard for it to be super followable.
But like I think it is kind of an unsolved problem. Like there is kind of this like triangle where you have like really interesting speculative ideas and like really interesting prose. And then you have like understandable. And you kind of have to pick like two of them. And it's so rare that you can like get a book that has all three of them. Like it's not that you'll like totally be missing one of the legs of the triangle, but you'll kind of have to compromise a bit on one of them. You know, like most great literary novels don't have particularly novel speculative ideas, and like most great speculative novels, like, you know, aren't particularly cooking with like the prose, at least from like an inventiveness perspective. And the ones that have both, I mean, yeah, they're often kind of tough to read. So I certainly sympathize with this problem.
Yeah, that's true. I've been reading like the Dandelion Dynasty Ken Liu books, and I feel like to some extent he sort of can accomplishes this by, in the first book, I feel like he doesn't go too crazy for like the speculative ideas. Like he aims for the other two, right? Wait, sorry. The other two pillars were being followable
and like inventive prose.
Yeah, and having inventive prose, right? But like the story is like pretty much just like a reskinning of the history regarding the founding of the Han Dynasty in China, and like the events are pretty easy to follow. Even if there is at sometimes like there's kind of a lot of characters and stuff, so maybe some things are a bit. Okay, it's not like that easy to follow still, but it's like he doesn't go too crazy with the ideas. But then in the next book in the series, with like the foundation built from the first one, he just like decides to like turn on all the ideas. To an extent where like at times it felt like a bit strange reading the second one, where I was like, wow, like he's kind of just like throwing all this shit into this world, sort of. But I feel like on some level this was intentional, and it was like it just like relied on you like knowing who all the characters were and stuff to an extent that just wouldn't really be possible if it was just starting with the first book.
Yeah. And like I think that when I was younger, I kind of took some of the finer points of storytelling for granted. You know, like I was kind of just like, wow, this movie wasn't that interesting. Like I remember when I saw Star Trek, what was it? Like the first Star Trek movie, with the reboot, the one with Chris Pine. I was complaining that like, well, like all they do in this movie is they like meet everyone, and like not that much really happens. Even though like it was pretty good as far as like meeting people goes, and like I guess like in my head, like the best way to do the story would be if you can kind of just like preload like the information that you need to know, so that like you can really get to what really happens. But you can't just take that out of the story. Like that's kind of even like a more important part of the story. And like I guess I've kind of come around to the idea that like, you know, you kind of have to earn your like crazy speculation. Like if you can't get there, then like you can't get there. I mean, maybe unless you're writing like a web serial or something. Like, I actually think I might have enjoyed Terra Ignota a lot more if it was a web serial with web serial pacing. Because that's the thing about web serials is like just because of their nature and the pacing, like they can kind of be like cooked almost like the complexity can kind of be cooked beyond belief, and like if you're interested enough, you'll eventually
Yeah.
figure out what's going on. Whereas in Terra Ignota, it's like, I ran a book. Like,
Yeah, I do kind of feel like Terra Ignota should have had like a little glossary just with like all the different hives, like short explanations. Of,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
the
Like,
main
honestly,
characters and
like,
stuff.
I wish more sci-fi did this. Like, I wish
Yeah.
more sci-fi just started and it was like, this is a big chunk of shit that you need to do. But like, this is just kind of considered bad style, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty good place to wrap things up. Kevin, do you have any short fiction recommendations for us?
Oh yeah, I do have one. Let me go find it. All right, so this story was a banger. It was called Five Stages of Grief After the Alien Invasion by Carolyn M. Yoachim. And the premise is that there are these people that are trying to I guess terraform the biosphere of Earth, and they don't realize it's inhabited, and so they spray it with all this kind of fertilizer, and this fertilizer ends up being pretty toxic to humans, and then they realize that Earth is populated, oh shit, and they manage to cure people, but not before pretty much all newborns and all the elderly just die. And they feel pretty bad about it, but also the reason they did this was so they could prepare a new world for their species to live on, and so they're a lot more technologically advanced than humans, and so they kind of force humans' hand, but it's just kind of an awkward relationship because they're just so we killed a lot of people, but we didn't mean to. Sorry, our bad. And they kind of look like these frogs. They're kind of just frog people, and so they're just kind of living amongst the humans in this world, and people are just kind of and the frogs are just sorry. Just and the main characters are just people where they're had someone close to them die in the pesticide thing. So one of them is this mother who is unable to come to terms with the fact that her newborn died in the pesticide thing, and she's taking care of a fake baby, and then all the other people who are kind of the real main characters are around her and trying to figure out how to help her process her grief. And sometimes we'll just see one of these frog people, and they're kind of just I guess they didn't mean to do it. And they're just sorry. It's just yeah, I don't know. The story had a very unique atmosphere. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
There's something really compelling about it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. That's the end of the solar season here, and we'll start up again in probably a couple of weeks.